ESMA is up and running, and also you have a very significant power in defining in concrete and operational terms the spirit of European law. In this context, with this new rule-making process, how, in your views, regulation can help to increase growth and efficiency of capital markets?
Thank you very much for that introduction, and sorry for making this evening more complicated by not perfectly speaking French. And so therefore the combination of languages this evening. Let me make a few points, and I also will get to the point on how we can, as ESMA, make a practical contribution to the implementation of the regulatory reform that we issued in response to the financial crisis. Maybe first on the point of the regulatory reform in response to the financial crisis, and now the focus on growth, and to what extent there is a tension or a contradiction between these two phases. And I must say that I think it is a false contradiction, it's a false opposition to say we first had the response to the financial crisis, now we need to focus on growth. If there's any rule in the past year that was against growth, we should have never issued that rule or that regulation. Regulation is not there to tax financial markets, they are there to make sure that they function properly. This is not to say that every piece of rule and regulation in the past year was the right one. We need to evaluate that. There might be mistakes between them. But there is a very consistent objective between the response to the financial crisis and the growth agenda. And we should not forget that in the past 7 years, we have lost about half a gross national product in Europe because of the financial crisis. That is loss of growth. So we need to be very careful to have this idea. We first focused on the response to the financial crisis. Let's now focus on growth, because these rules are there because we made a mistake in the past, and because of that mistake, we lost half a gross national product in the past years. Similarly, I think we have to be careful with the idea that the stability issues are now behind us. The fact that we are now going through a stage where stock markets, valuations in the non-banking sector are meeting record highs is very concerning if you compare that with the underlying economic situation, especially in continental Europe. The risks currently of overvaluation in the non-banking sector is quite substantial. If you go today to the reports on the performance of the various equity indices in Europe, you will see that they are very high, and that is very concerning if you connect that with the very problematic economic situation that we're getting from, let's say, the fundamentals, on the fundamental problems in the economies in Europe in general, and I think especially in continental Europe. Also, and maybe finally on this point between regulatory response and the growth agenda, we should not underestimate to what extent the regulatory response has improved the single market, the internal market, for at least in the financial market era, in the era of securities markets. We really have progressed on moving towards a single market, to less barriers, to really creating an internal market. So there was a very strong label on it of this is in response to stability concerns, but a lot of the reforms, including on OTC derivatives, including on MiFID, including on market abuse, are also standardization across Europe, which should really help building the internal market. And maybe finally, and to go to the report also of Jacques de la Rosière, who was the founder, the intellectual founder of the new supervisory system in Europe. He very much emphasized how fragmentation is problematic for stability, but fragmentation obviously is also negative for the internal market and making sure that we have a well-functioning financial market. Let me then progress a bit on the issue raised earlier already by Martin Malin about the Capital Markets Union and the idea of increasing the importance of the non-banking sector. I think that has been explained very well. Maybe a few remarks on that issue. First of all, the focus should not only be in trying to get more non-bank funding, but also in the non-bank sector to a broad range of channels. This can vary from private equity to regular stock exchange listings. It can be investment funds, it can be crowdfunding, and we need to make sure from a policy perspective that all these channels are open. And I think we need to be careful as regulators or as policymakers to say this is the right channel or to express a certain preference. It's really up to the investors and the issuers, to the companies, to select which channel they use. It might, depending on the issue at hand, depending on the time where they are, a certain channel might be a better one than the other one. And I think we should be very careful with having strong preferences as regulator or policymakers for one of these channels. A second important reason for increasing non-bank funding is that I think it will increase the competitiveness of our financial system. We are bank-dominated. The banking system in itself is quite concentrated. There are concerns about the competitiveness of the banking sector in general. I think it will be very beneficial to have a broader range of channels, which will in itself increase choice for companies, will increase choice for investors, and will increase also the competitiveness of the financial system as a whole. Thirdly, on the increasing the diversity is the element that it will allow more opportunities for equity funding. We currently have a bank-dominated system where, and by definition, a bank-dominated system is debt-oriented. Debt overhang is a problem both for the public sector and private sector in Europe. And so, and we cannot stimulate investors with taking more debt on board, either in the public sector or in the private sector. At least it's very difficult. The benefits of the non-banking sector is that there's more opportunities for equity funding, which is really, I think, a beneficial way of trying to increase the investments without increasing the indebtedness of both the private sector and the public sector. So what should be done in addition to increasing the diversity of the various channels for funding our economy? I think we need indeed to think about how can we develop this non-banking sector. And I think Martin already very well explained that the term Capital Markets Union was very smart of the chair of Juncker to get it on the map, to get a buzz around this issue, but in reality it's not the right comparison. This is not about centralization of supervision, and this is about 28 member states. This is not about the Eurozone area. It should be about all 28 member states. In my view, and obviously it's up to the Commission to come up with proposals, and to the Commissioner, and we're really looking forward to that. Personally, in my view, this should be about accelerated integration of the European capital markets, and we indeed need to look at improving the further efficiency of the EU capital markets. We still have substantial barriers between the member states. Although we have progressed very well in the past 20, 30 years on trying to remove these barriers, to reduce the fragmentation of the European capital markets, we still have barriers between the member states when we're talking about the non-banking sector. One very nice example, not nice, but at least that illustrates it very well. If you as an investor in the EU would like to have a real-time picture of the equity prices on a monthly basis, it will take you 430 euros to get a subscription to that information. The same information will take you in the US about 58 euros. Just one very simple example where there are more barriers in the EU market. Obviously, removing barriers between the various member states is a long-term process. We have worked on that in the past 20, 30 years. If we're looking at the years ahead, we need to be selective in which areas can we further remove barriers, and we really need to assess that case by case. In which areas are those areas that are really hampering the cross-investments across Europe, which is hampering the possibilities for companies to find investors in other member states, and it can be a range of issues. It can be around the details of the prospectus regime, it can be about corporate governance of companies, it can be about the governance of SMEs, and it also can be about the shareholder rights. Finally, and I think I need to go back on the point and the very precise question that Edouard posed to me on what can we do and contribute to as ESMA to this. Obviously, we're in the middle of the implementation of the regulatory reform. We're in the middle of the implementation of MiFID, EMIR. There will be lots of stakeholders here in the audience that are sending us letter with their insights on how we should implement that. You can be assured that when we get these, we at the one hand, we very clearly need and will take the level 1 into account, what has been the decisions by the Parliament and the Council. At the same time, it's our role as ESMA to make sure that the level 1 works as good as possible in practice. And so we definitely take very much your comments into account, stakeholders, broad range of stakeholders, both from the investor side and from the issuer side, from the market infrastructure side, and to make sure that the level 1 decisions work as good as possible in practice. Thank you very much.